Hello everyone, and welcome back. So, Chesnaught Tera raids. These are actually going to be quite easy. The only tricky part is actually making them easy. The reason for this is Chesnaught's ability actually locks out most of our best options we've been using for previous Tera raids. So, finding the workaround to those was the tricky part, but with those workarounds now found, this is going to be just a complete joke. And the main reason for this is its ability gives it immunity to, and I will explain all of this later because right now if I explain it at this early in the video, YouTube's algorithm will completely destroy the video and the channel. Its ability grants it immunity to all force multiplication moves and force exponentialator moves. Again, I will explain later. I need to use kind of a few specific wordings right now or YouTube will completely destroy the video, so just bear with me for a second. A list of the affected moves is actually going to be popping up on screen right now, and yes, you are noticing the big ones are actually locked out. Energy Ball was pretty much going to be our best attacking option, however its ability locks that out. And our best debuffing option, the always wonderful Acid Spray, is also locked out to us. There's really only a few ways of getting around this, Mold Breaker or skill swapping away its ability. However, given how Nintendo has been learning our ability to counter raids and then has been deliberately countering us, again especially with what Inteleon pulled recently, they're going to come up with ways of stopping this, which is why I am not going to be leaning heavily on any of those long skill swap chains to allow this, because it is very likely Nintendo has figured out ways of just shutting these down very easily. So we're going with the worst case scenario of these things have been counterplanned and already figured out by Nintendo and stopped. But before we get on to that, if you're new, please consider leaving a subscribe. We've got all sorts of content here on the channel that you will enjoy. We do blind Let's Plays, shiny hunts, and even team games like Splatoon. And if we manage to hit 4K by the end of July, we're going to be doing a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Infinite Fusions. But yeah, the long and short is we just don't have access to Acid Spray or Energy Ball. And this is why this video is going to be a little bit different than the previous Tera Raid guides, where we're actually going to be covering what not to use first. The main reason for this is because how heavily this affects everything going forward. It's easier to say up front, this is why these things should not be used or cannot be used, rather than every single time we're explaining something saying why this thing isn't here, as well as to clear up potential misconceptions. Because we don't always mention every single option, and this can make some people think that, well, maybe something is viable when it really isn't. First one to start off with is, as mentioned before, the large skill swap chains of Weak Armor and Bullet Seed. This sounds really, really fun, and I actually really like this idea. The main issue is that if Taunt simply is in play, if the Tera Shield starts right from the get-go, you're locked out. If it has Rock Slide, which is very likely to have Rock Slide, this is locked out if you get flinched. It is extremely easy for Chesnaught to shut this entire thing down, even if Bullet Seed can actually do a lot of damage when stacking up all those weak armor boosts. It's very inconsistent and very, very up to chance. The other part is, because of weak armor's effect of boosting its speed every single time it is hit, you are giving Chesnaught a massive speed boost. The one edge you have over Chesnaught in this case is you are faster than it. Giving a Pokemon that is very likely to get a move like Drain Punch, very likely to get something like Wood Hammer, very likely to get the devastating Rock Slide, which has a 30% chance of flinching, boosting that thing's speed up to maximum to outspeed you is a massive liability. It also doesn't help that if you are fainted out, many of the best skill swap weak armor users are not very bulky themselves, and this will continue to chip away at their bulk as well. Again, Technician Bullet Seed Breloom with loaded dice into weak armor Chesnaught is a really fun idea. However, it is simply impractical. A bit secondary to this is actually physical attackers as a whole are not very good to use on this thing. That pretty much 50 base difference in physical defense versus special defense, 122 versus 75, is massive. In Iron Hands at +6 from Belly Drum using Drain Punch and Adamant Nature 252, compared to a Nasty Plot boosted Goldengo just using Modest 252 Flash Cannon, the damage numbers are actually a lot closer than you'd think. The Drain Punch at most deals 350% of base Chesnaught's damage. This is accounting for the super effective Tera typing, whereas Goldengo's Flash Cannon deals approximately 275%. Basically, Goldengo's one-shotting it 3 times over, whereas Iron Hands is 3-shotting it about 3.5 times over. It sounds better for the Iron Hands because it's doing more damage, but it's a far riskier setup. And this is Iron Hands, the single most powerful attacker against this thing. Again, Taunt absolutely shuts this down. The Stat Purge completely destroys this. And depending on how often this happens, it just gets taken down. If you get rid of that ability purge, or you just get knocked out because you are slower than Chesnaught here, or you get flinched, you're not really doing a good situation here. For a bit more of a context, Belly Drums +6 quadruples Iron Hand's attack power, so that is a 4 times boost to its attack. Simply using Nasty Plot to boost Goldengo's special attack is a double boost to its special attack, so ×4 versus ×2. That is how big that 50 base difference is. You're going to be leaning on special attacks for this. And also, Bulletproof does not block Flash Cannon. There's a few moves that seem like they should be, but they aren't, and this is because Bulletproof's move blocks are actually informed by the Japanese names, not the English translated one. This is actually why Flash Cannon is allowed, but Zap Cannon isn't, though Aura Sphere is blocked, but other moves are not. The physical attackers are also somewhat undermined by its access to a lot of actually physical buffing options. It gets Sword Stance, Iron Defense, Bulk Up, and Curse, though Bulk Up and Curse are kind of the same thing, just one's a little bit worse. If it has any form of defense boosting, physical attackers are just default worse than special attackers. It has no means of buffing its special defense. It does not get access to Sandstorm, so you don't need to worry about that unless Game Freak last second adds it to its moveset, which they did do for Typhlosion with Shadow Ball. So there is that chance, but we are not going to be leaning heavily on that as it really doesn't change anything else. And then this brings us to the final sort of species-specific locks, and these are the 4 ones I know people are actually very much liking to use. Weak Armor Ceruledge, Weak Armor Armarouge. We've mentioned these two before, but the Armarouge in particular because it does not get access to the fantastic Acid Spray or Energy Ball, which you can use very well. And its weakness to Rock and Weak Armor doesn't pair up very well, because otherwise it would actually be fantastic for this. Ceruledge, much of the same, it's a physical attacker, gets kind of walled out. And then the last two are Meowscarada, even though yes, Flower Trick is very powerful with that always critting, and if it does boost its defense, Flower Trick's base power is not very high as it's base 70, and its physical attack is also not that high as well. Even if you're always critting through the defense boost if they are there, you're still weak to Drain Punch, unless you have Protean, in which case you can't set up, say, things like Swords Dance, and then you go to normal, and then you're weak to Drain Punch, which you potentially could have. Or you just go straight for Flower Trick, you become Grass, yes, but you're still quite frail. The last one is Lucario. It is weak to the very likely fighting move it is going to have. Aura Sphere is completely locked out to it. It has Flash Cannon, yes, but it is overall quite frail, and unlike some other Steel types, it does not have an immunity to fighting. If it does have a ground move, all of the Steel types are actually weak to this no matter what. So it's a bit of a case of here nor there, and you're best going off with the bulkiest Steel type. But now with all of that done, let's get into actually what is the best options for beating this. We'll be going in order of best attackers, your supporters, and then we'll round out with the solo play options. Now, onto our attacking options. The best and safest bet is something that gets around the Acid Spray lockout. Appleton. All of Chesnaught's scariest and, most importantly, likely moves, you actually shrug off completely. There's only one move it has that you're kind of afraid of, and that is if it has Poison Jab, which I don't realistically see coming. It's possible, but if it does come, it means it also skimps on other coverage options, which is good for one of the other options we're going after this, as basically option 1 and option 2 cover each other completely. If one is not viable, the other will be viable because just simply it can't have enough moves. By getting around Bulletproof, as you can't use Acid Spray normally, there's one move that Appleton gets that is unique to it. Apple Acid. This is an 80 base power special grass move that will always drop special defense. It is only a single stage special defense drop rather than a 2-stage special defense drop. However, this is offset by, first of all, the better power that Apple Acid has, the being super effective, the being same type attack bonus, and the fact that you just want to be using an attacking move like this anyway. You are able to keep momentum as you're doing damage. It also manages to get around if the taunt is in play, because it does actually have access to the move taunt. It is likely it could have this to shut down status moves, or if the Tera shield goes up immediately, preventing the use of moves like Fake Tears. Again, considering Game Freak has been learning and has been countering the previous strategies we have been using, case in point how Cinderace had that bulk up spam after we destroyed Charizard with Azumarill, very recently with Inteleon having access to that Mist and Snowscape immediately to minimize its physical damage and prevent being debuffed. Something like this is more likely than you'd think. Could it potentially not happen? Yes, but it's best to err on the side of caution rather than going with a plan that relies very heavily on status moves before being countered into oblivion. This is the safest play. By debuffing special defense, you then open to the ability to be using Giga Drain. This is why I would say this is the best option. Also, as we're going to go over later, the best solo option, because now you can have Apple Acid to crush defense, you have Giga Drain to give long-term sustain, meaning your item can be a damage booster, things like either Life Orb or Expert Belt. I would generally lean a bit more to Expert Belt because Life Orb can deal some residual damage, and you're not healing every single turn, unlike something like, say, Drain Punch Iron Hands, which we use in our regular raid. So the other option is actually Covert Cloak. There's a few issues that Appleton does have. One is it is quite slow, so you are going to need to either invest very heavily in speed, you need to actually invest your nature and maximum stats into speed in order to outrun the Chesnaught to not get flinched by Rock Slide, run the Covert Cloak as your item to prevent those flinches, or set up the move Trailblaze with a little bit of speed investment in order to outpace it so you don't get flinched. Depending on how aggressively it stat purges, the last one may not be too viable, however, it is the one I am preferably leaning on. The best real case is just alternate with Apple Acid and Giga Drain, though if you're going for the solo, there's a bit more explanation for that we're going to go into later. Stat spreads specifically for this are 252 physical defense, Modest Nature, 252 special attack if you want to go for one build that are just pure damage. The one I personally lean on is 200 physical defense, Modest Nature, 252 special attack, 56 speed EVs, and Trailblaze. If you use Trailblaze, you go to +1, you then outspeed the Chesnaught, so you don't get flinched anymore unless it cheats, which, again, may not be the most viable, but there's a chance. The move you're going to need for this, really all you're going to need is Apple Acid and Giga Drain. Its ability doesn't particularly matter, because you're not going to be using a berry as a held item, and your allies are probably not going to be using items either that are berries. And you're always going to want to terrestrialize into grass for this. The second best option, and actually the original one I was thinking of using, is Gholdengo. Because of Nasty Plot and access to Metal Sound, it can do out a lot of damage. However, again, if the Tera Shield is present, this can be a little bit problematic, as well as the Stat Purge. Though, because you are having the ability Good as Gold, you cannot be taunted unless it Stat Purges you, then it uses Taunt to hit you, thus locking out Close Flat, thus locking out your Nasty Plot. However, you naturally outspeed it, meaning you can invest fully in your bulk. The only thing that it's actually scared of is potential physical attack boosting with things like Swords Dance or Bulk Up, and then a move like Shadow Claw or Earthquake. But one significant downgrade it has over the Appleton is it does need the Shell Bell or the move Recover to continuously have that healing. It doesn't do enough damage for the Shell Bell to heal it. That is one of the reasons I do, of course, prefer the Appleton, as it does maintain the momentum. Pretty much same spread you're always going to want on it, maximum physical defense, modest 252 special attack, 252 physical defense, and item's going to be the Shell Bell. All you're going to need is Nasty Plot, Flash Cannon, Metal Sound, and if you would like, you can go with Make It Rain for big burst damage, and you're going to want Terra Steel for this. The third niche option here is a bit of the opposite of Appleton, and it is Lurantis. It kind of combines aspects of both Gholdengo and Appleton, but is a little worse at everything than both. But it has one very significant plus point, and that is Contrary Leaf Storm. Because of this, you can snowball its special attack to an insane degree, giving yourself +6 after 3 uses, and then just continue alternating between Giga Drain and Leaf Storm. Depending on when the ability and Stat Purge goes off, this will make it either viable or not. You are locked out for a few turns of having your Contrary boost, and if you get your Purge and then you use Leaf Storm, you actually debuff yourself before enough time passes. Thus, you're gonna be at a big disadvantage. It's a bit finicky, but once the actual ordering of attacks is figured out, I think this can be a fairly solid one. though it is important to remember it will always be doing less damage than Appleton. Main reason for this is it does not have as high of a special attack as Appleton, and Tera raid bosses as of late have focused more on purging you rather than purging themselves. So, again, I lean more towards Appleton. But it is a bit of a fun option. That's also not to say you can't combo all three of these Pokemon together. They all work very well together. They're individual pieces that work well, but combined together, they are fantastic. But next we have the dedicated support. As always, your Metal Sound Fake Tears users are going to be fantastic for this. Again, provided the Tera Shield is not immediately applied. If it is, all these go out the window. Again, Bold 252, max HP, max physical defense is what they're going to want. Leftovers held item, you're good to go. Things like Corviknight are fantastic, Fake Tears Grimmsnarl, even potentially Metal Sound Miraidon. This is also where the support Appleton comes into play, as Appleton does do that sort of hybrid support and damage. But there is one other that I am surprised no one remembered, that is basically Acid Spray users, but it is not blocked by Bulletproof. Espathra. Lumina Crash will always debuff your special defense by 2 stages, so it's basically Acid Spray. The other edge that Espathra has is Opportunist. If this has any form of boosting, be it Iron Defense, Bulk Up, or a Curse, you steal those boosts as well, so it can boost up its defense all it wants, and you just copy those. Meaning you increase your physical bulk. The only thing it's afraid of is if it has Shadow Claw, and it boosts its physical attack, and it lands a crit. That is the only thing Espathra is afraid of, while completely crushing its special defense. Because it's also so much faster than everything else, you will get off those debuffs before your grass types land the big smack attack. And if you're worried about being frail, if you go maximum physical defense, so 252 physical defense, 252 HP, and bold nature, you will survive most hits very safely. You are only scared of Shadow Claw. And that is only Shadow Claw if it is boosted in its physical attack, as in Swords Dance or Curse boosted, and then it lands a critical hit. Because Lumina Crash is also an attacking move, it will bypass the Tera Shield status move blocking, so even if it leads off with the Tera Shield or it leads off with a taunt, you're still good to go. Now for your solo attempts. This really goes back to Appleton. I think it is the single safest option as far as solo options go. The main reason for this stems from, one, Apple Acid simply being a fantastic move, and its natural bulk. Goldengo is fantastic, however, Goldengo's setup is a bit long and time consuming, whereas it can't really heal itself as well either. Compare that to Appleton, which has defense destroying, sustaining moves, naturally very high bulk, but it is a little finicky. The other thing is that Appleton does get its Tera attack far quicker. Status moves do not increase your Tera move counter. You need to use 3 attacking moves, even before it Tera charge steals. So using moves like Metal Sound, Nasty Plot, or the Healing Cheer or Recover will not increase that counter. Just spamming something like Apple Acid or Giga Drain will actually increase that counter, as well as using, of course, the Trailblaze to actually get the counter higher. Thus, you can Terastallize far quicker and deal far more damage. There's a few ways you can do this. Again, I personally lean on the Trailblaze into the speed boosting to outspeed it and avoid the potential Rock Slide flinches. But if you want to go with the Covert Cloak and not need to deal with that, you can just go for Apple Acid initially. You're going to want to alternate between Apple Acid and Giga Drain, really keeping your HP topped off just in case it gets a Greasy Flinch. But all in all, it's a fairly easy way of beating. Just alternate what moves you're using, and when its HP gets to around half, you still can't one-shot it from there. If the Tera Shield is up, you're going to break that first, but once its HP gets to about 1/3 remaining, if there is no shield, Leaf Storm will take it out if you're Terastallized into grass. Leaf Storm will one-shot it 10 times over, and considering these things have 30 times HP, takes out that last 1/3 of its HP. Though it needs to be at -6 for this to happen. Again, Appleton's biggest weakness is despite it can actually set up minus debuffs on special defense, it does not have any special attack boosting options. So it is going to be the slow and steady wins the race sort of fight for this. The only other possible solo option is that I can think of is if it does not have any physical defense boosting. or it does not use Taunt, it doesn't have Spiky Shield, and doesn't have Leech Seed, is Iron Hands. Again, Iron Hands does do a lot of damage with a setup Belly Drum. The only problem is you could potentially get flinched, you get taunted. If it takes you out before then, you need to set up Belly Drum again, cut your HP, and you put yourself in a very big risk scenario. But if it doesn't have any form of defense boosting, your Drain Punches will still do a lot of damage. You do enough damage to actually win, provided it doesn't have access to certain things such as grassy terrain boosted wood hammers. Again, you are in a little bit of a risky scenario, and depending on when the stat purge happens, this can completely take it out of the equation, but it is possible once we figure out some of the ordering in which it attacks. But that is all for today. Thank you for watching. If you are new, please again consider subscribing, and catch you guys later. I've been Maxis. Let's rock and roll up.